Welcome back to the Explainer. So in our last session, we covered the practical expedient for short-term contracts, and we nailed down those three absolutely crucial criteria you need to capitalize costs when fulfilling a contract. By now, you should be totally equipped to look at a cost and confidently say, yes, this qualifies for capitalization under ASC 340-40, or no, it doesn't. Today, we're taking the next logical step. We're going to look at the chronological life cycle of a capitalized cost. Think of it like this. Once you know a cost qualifies, how exactly do you record it? How does it age over time? And, maybe most importantly, what happens when things go wrong?
Here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at 1. Initial measurement, 2. Amortization period, 3. Amortization methods, 4. Impairment testing, and 5. Impairment triggers. Let's trace this journey.
Section 1. Initial measurement. Recording the cost. Our journey starts right at day 1. The rule here is incredibly straightforward, but honestly, it's vital to get it right. Capitalized contract costs are measured strictly at cost, period. That means you take the total of all those directly attributable amounts that actually met the recognition criteria we talked about last time. There is no discounting applied here. There is no fair value step up or step down, and there's absolutely no option to just record it at a reduced amount because you want to be conservative. No way. If the cost qualifies, you record it at the exact total amount paid or accrued without a single adjustment. It really is just that simple.
Section 2. Amortization period. Determining the timeline, because now that we've got the asset on the balance sheet, we have to figure out how long it's going to live. I want you to really think about this for a second. Does the amortization period just automatically equal the stated contract term? You know, you look at a contract, it has a start date, it has an end date. It's so tempting to just grab those dates off the physical paper and punch them into your amortization schedule. But as we're about to see, taking that shortcut could lead to a massive accounting error.
Here's the catch. The amortization period is the time over which the asset is actually consumed, and that is not always the same as the stated contract term. The rules explicitly state that your amortization period must include anticipated renewals. That is, if the cost relates to goods or services you expect to transfer during those renewals. So this isn't just basic data entry. It requires real substantive judgment. You have to look way beyond that initial piece of paper and apply analytical thinking to figure out exactly how long those upfront costs will actually benefit your ongoing relationship with the customer.
Okay, let's look at how this actually plays out in a few scenarios. If you pay your commission on a fixed 3-year contract and there's zero expectation of renewal, your amortization period is just 3 years. Easy, right? But now, imagine you pay a big upfront commission on a 1-year contract, but you have a really high likelihood of a 5-year cumulative renewal. Because that initial commission economically benefits the entire ongoing relationship, you have to amortize it over the full expected benefit period, which is up to 6 years. This is an absolute game changer for subscription or recurring revenue models. On the other hand, an incremental commission paid later on, just for a renewal, that only relates to that specific 1-year renewal period. And standard setup costs? Usually, those are strictly amortized over the initial contract term.
Section 3. Amortization methods. The pattern of transfer. So we have our timeline. Now what's the math look like?
The core principle you need to remember here is alignment. After you initially recognize them, your capitalized contract costs have to be amortized on a basis that's consistent with how the goods or services actually transfer to the customer. Now, in most normal, everyday cases, straight-line amortization over the benefit period makes total sense and is completely standard. But if your revenue is being recognized in a really front-loaded or back-loaded pattern, your amortization pattern absolutely must mirror that reality. You can't just recognize all your revenue up front and then lazily amortize the costs straight line over 5 years. It doesn't work that way. And remember, anytime you deviate from that straight-line default, you've got to carefully document your method and the rationale behind it.
Section 4. Impairment testing. Health checkups. What happens when reality bites? Look, we've perfectly measured our asset, we've set a highly accurate timeline, and we're methodically amortizing it. But what if the customer suddenly goes bankrupt, or market conditions completely flip? At every single reporting date, you are legally required to perform a health check on your capitalized contract costs to see if they've been impaired. Impairment basically means your asset's carrying amount, what's sitting there on your balance sheet, exceeds its recoverable amount. And that recoverable amount is just the remaining money you actually expect to get from the customer minus whatever costs you still have to pay to deliver the goods or services.
I always like to picture this test as a giant set of scales. On the left side, you've got your carrying amount. On the right side, you've got your available margin, which again is your remaining expected revenue minus your remaining direct fulfillment costs. You've got to constantly weigh these two sides. If the left side, the carrying amount, is heavier than the right side, well, you've got a problem. Your asset is valued higher on your books than the cash it can actually generate, and that means impairment exists. Let's put some hard numbers to this so you can see exactly how it builds out. Imagine you've got a capitalized contract cost sitting on your balance sheet at $8,000. That's your carrying amount. You look at the contract, and you expect to bring in another $15,000 in revenue. Great. But wait, to get that revenue, you still have to spend $9,000 in direct fulfillment costs. So $15,000 minus $9,000 leaves you with an available margin of just $6,000. Because your $8,000 carrying amount is larger than your $6,000 available margin, the asset literally cannot be fully supported anymore. You are forced to recognize a $2,000 impairment loss right then and there, and that immediately drops the carrying amount on your books down to that $6,000 mark.
Section 5. Impairment triggers. What happens outside the normal cycle? While that period-end review we just talked about is strictly required, there are times in the real world when you simply cannot wait for the end of the reporting period. These are your red flags. If a contract is canceled early or the scope is significantly reduced, you have to drop everything and test. If your customer is in severe financial distress and might not pay, you test. And hey, remember earlier when we anchored a 6-year amortization period on the assumption that they'd renew? If that expected renewal probability suddenly tanks, that is a massive trigger demanding immediate testing. Finally, if the underlying technology or product gets replaced or becomes obsolete, the carrying value of those costs is probably in serious jeopardy.
And this brings us to a pretty sobering reality of ASC 340-40. Once recognized, the write-down is permanent. Impairment losses on contract cost assets absolutely cannot be reversed in a subsequent period. Not even if the customer wins the lottery and their financial conditions miraculously improve. Not even if the market bounces completely back. This is exactly why the domino effect from your earlier measurement choices is such a big deal. If you improperly measure the timeline or you miscalculate the margin and it triggers a write-down, you are locked into that loss forever.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this question to really chew on. Are your impairment checks proactively built into your close calendar, or are you just waiting around reacting when a contract is already flashing red and in distress? Treating these steps as mandatory, built-in requirements and not just afterthoughts is going to save you from some major compliance headaches down the road. In our next explainer, we're going to take all of these rules we've been talking about and translate them into a full set of journal entries. We'll be walking through 3 end-to-end worked examples, so you definitely won't want to miss seeing how all this theory turns into hard numbers. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.